The corner window was indicative of an idea conceived early in my work that the box was a fascist symbol and the architecture of freedom, of democracy, needed something beside the box. So I started out to destroy the box as a building. Well, the corner window came in as all the comprehension that ever was given to that act of the destruction of the box. The light came in where it had never come before. Vision went out, and you had screens instead of walls. Here the walls vanished as walls, and the box vanished as a box. And the corner window went around the world, but the idea of the thing never followed it. And it became merely a window instead of the release of an entire sense of structure.
This is Frank Lloyd Wright from his book, An American Architecture. I had felt this need for features quite early in my architectural life. You will see this feeling growing up, becoming more apparent a little later in Unity Temple. There perhaps is where you will find the first real expression of the idea that the space within the building is the reality of the building. Unity Temple is where I thought I had it, this idea that the reality of a building no longer consisted in the walls and roof. So that sense of freedom began, which had come into the architecture of today for you, and which we call organic architecture. You may see there in Unity Temple how I dealt with this great architectural problem at that time. You will find the sense of the great room coming through, space not walled in now, but more or less free to appear. In Unity Temple, you will find the walls actually disappearing. You will find the interior space opening to the outside and the outside coming in. You will see assembled about this interior space, screening it, various free related features instead of enclosing walls. See, you can now make features of many types for enclosure and group the features about the interior space with no sense of boxing it. But most important, after all, is a sense of shelter extended, expanded overhead, and which gives the indispensable sense of protection while leading the human vision beyond the walls. That primitive sense of shelter is a quality architecture should always have. If, in a building, you feel not only protection from above, but liberation of the interior to outside space, which you do feel in Unity Temple and other buildings I have built, then you have one important secret of letting the interior space come through. Now I will try and show you why organic architecture is the architecture of democratic freedom. Why? Well, here, say, is your box. Big hole in the box, little ones if you wish, of course. What you see of it now is this square package of containment. You see? Something not fit for our liberal profession of democratic government, a thing essentially anti-individual. Here you may see, more or less, the student architecture of almost all our colleges. I was never ambitious to be an engineer. Unfortunately, I was educated as one in the University of Wisconsin, but I knew enough of engineering to know that the outer angles of a box were not where its most economical support would be if you made a building of it. No, a certain distance in each way from each corner is where the economic support of a box or building is invariably to be found. You see? Now, when you put the support at these points, you've created a short cantileverage to the corners that lessens actual spans and sets the corner free or open for whatever distance you choose. The corners disappear altogether if you choose to let space come in there or let it go out. Instead of post and beam construction, the usual box building, you now have a new sense of building construction by way of cantilever and continuity, Both are new structural elements as they now enter architecture. But all you will see of this radical liberation of space all over the world today is the corner window. But in this simple change of thought lies the essential of the architectural change from the box to the free plan and the new reality that is space instead of matter. From this point, we can go on to talk about organic architecture instead of classic architecture. Let's go on. These unattached sidewalls become something independent, no longer enclosing walls. They're separate supporting screens, any one of which may be shortened or extended or perforated or occasionally eliminated. These freestanding screens support the roof. What of this roof? Overhead, it becomes emphasized as a splendid sense of shelter, but shelter that hides nothing when you are inside looking out from the building. It is a shape of shelter that really gives a sense of the outside coming in or the inside going out. Yes, you have now a wide-spreading overhead that is really a release of this interior space to the outside. A freedom where before imprisonment existed. You can perfect a figure of freedom with these four screens. In any case, enclosure as a box is gone. Anything becoming, anything in the nature of plan or materials is easily a possibility. To go further, if this liberation works in the horizontal plane, why won't it work in the vertical plane? No one has looked through the box at the sky up there at the upper angle, have they? Why not? Because the box always had a cornice at the top. It was added to the sides in order that the box might not look so much like a box, but more classic. This cornice was the feature that made your conventional box classic. Now to go on, there in the Johnson building, you catch no sense of enclosure whatever at any angle, top or sides. You're looking at the sky and feel the freedom of space. The columns are designed to stand up and take over the ceiling. The column is made part of the ceiling. Continuity. The old idea of a building is, as you see, quite gone. Everything before these liberating thoughts of cantilever and continuity took effect was post and beam construction, superimposition of one thing upon another, and repetition of slab over slab, always on posts. Now what? You've established a natural use of glass according to this new freedom of space. Space may now go out and come in where life is being lived, space as a component of it. So organic architecture is the architecture in which you may feel and see all this happen as a third dimension. Too bad the Greeks didn't know of this new use for steel and glass as a third dimension. If they had known what I'm trying to describe here, you wouldn't have to think much about it for yourselves today. The schools would long ago have taught these principles to you. The corner window is a tool Wright uses to free interior space and connect it to exterior space. This is a logical extension of his early work to decompartmentalize interior space. The overlapping of rooms in plan, the elimination of interior corners, the free flow of space from one room to the next, all serve to destroy the box. Here, Wright's Charles Ross house of 1902 is contrasted with a similar house of the era. Note how the spaces flow into each other. Here's the living room of the house as a box. Here is the dining room as a box. Where these spaces overlap, the corners have been eliminated. The blue space belongs to both rooms and exists as a common space, allowing the communication between the two rooms. Here's the living room of our conventional house. Note that the corners of the room are intact and the doorways are merely holes cut in the wall and dressed up with trim. There is limited communication and flow of space between the rooms. Here is a simplified model of Wright's Ross house. Sorry about the windows, I didn't have time to draw them in. That kind of makes the house look more modern than it actually was. Note how the corner between the living and dining rooms is missing. Space and inhabitants are now free to flow easily between the two rooms. This diagonal flow of space between the two rooms creates a liberating sense of freedom. Here's our typical diagram showing the support for a conventional home at the corners. The corners remove, creating cantilevers, and then how far Wright could take that concept. You can see that the support elements are mainly isolated masonry piers or columns, extended short walls, but most of them are actually perpendicular to what would be the normal outside wall, and the spaces between them are mostly filled with windows. In the Usonian plan at the bottom, we see the exterior walls as screens, allowing communication between the inside and outside space. So here you can see our classic box house with the structural points at the corners. There are windows and doors in the front, but there are holes cut in the wall. The wall's continuous, and it's an element of containment, isolation between inside and out. The openings in the box are small and let in little light or air. They create a sense of isolation from the world outside of the box. Anyway, let's go inside. Here you can see that there's little communication between inside and outside. You're contained in a regular shape, a predictable regular shape, without much interest or stimulation to it. One corner's more or less the same as another. So we're contained, we're in a predictable, repetitious space. So how can we mix this up? How do we make this a more free, liberating space to be in? Here we've moved our support points in away from the corners, and we've left them open for corner windows. You can see that the roof is now cantilevered over the corners, and the support points are moved in. Now suddenly we have openings where we never had them before. Let's go inside. And here you can see that the space is a little less predictable. Where there's normally, we've always seen, structure, there's nothing there. We're looking outside. You can see that peeping Tom out there. The corner window in this way liberates the space. The inside's free to go out, the outside's free to come in. There's less of an effect of boundary, less of a repetitious wall of containment. It's been cut away now, and there's a sense of liberation now. So now let's take our little building and give it the full Wright treatment. See what we can do here. So we've now taken our walls and taken support points and actually rotated them 90 degrees to where there's very little of the wall as a sense of confinement. The walls no longer go up to meet the ceiling in most places, except the few support points. The windows go around the corners. Where we used to see structure, there's no longer structure there. Yet, we feel safe and contained under a broad spreading roof. Here I've added a raised roof section to the living room with clerestory windows between the two roofs. This creates a vertical flow of space as well. Okay, here's something I wanted to try. Here I've modeled the bedroom I grew up in Florida. The house is stucco covered concrete block with aluminum frame awning windows. And you can see there are holes cut in the block wall. There's plaster on all the walls, and everything's painted a nice homogeneous beige. Very predictable, very ordinary. So yes, the outside was that color pink. Oh, there's that peeping Tom again. That window looks at the backyard. These windows looked at the neighbor's garage, and they're the closet doors. So the room was almost a perfect square, 10-foot square, 8-foot high. Perfect cube, I should say. This was typical Florida tract house construction of the late 50s, early 60s. Let's see if we can make some changes to make this a little more Wrightian. So as you can see, I've taken the windows and extended them to the corner. However, there's still a single block column in the corner. This is typical of how the international style addressed the corner window. They still kept that support right there. They didn't trust a cantilever. Just ignore the man behind the curtain. We didn't have that many palm trees. We just had 2 in the front yard. I wanted to make it feel very Floridian. Now I have I've minimized the corner support. We're down to a single steel post. You see, as we minimize that, the sense of openness, feeling of confined and predictable corners being lessened. On this version, we've actually taken out the corner supports. You can see I've moved them in a foot or so. We now have mitered glass at the corner. Now suddenly that corner doesn't feel quite so confining anymore. We're getting a little more communication between inside and outside. So here we installed a hip roof and raised the corner window up to the eaves. You can see how losing the predictable band of wall over the windows creates a greater sense of freedom. The eaves come inside as a low deck under the cathedral ceiling of the hip roof. And yes, the original house had a hip roof, but inside all the ceilings were flat. Here, in this model, we've pushed the upper wall back into the back wall of the closet, adding additional space above the closet to the room and making its outline far less predictable. In this version, I've added a French door out to a rear patio. I've also turned the other window into a clerestory window so that I don't have to look at the neighbor's garage. The support for the roof extends out as a privacy wall. Now we have a pair of French doors to the patio, and the corner windows run from floor to ceiling. Anyway, that's my attempt to demonstrate how Wrightian principles apply to a Florida tract house. Now I'm going to show a few classic Wright structures and how they liberate space. So here is the Lamberson house, and we're looking out the corner window. What I love about this house is how the couch cushions for the built-in banquette extend out onto the patio. I think that was a very smart move of the new owners for the house. This is the Bachman-Wilson house and has one of my favorite windows. This one's at the corner. The back wall of the house is continuous, and so you can actually watch the wall continue on outside the living room, which gives you the sense that the living room extends out there, or maybe there's another room out there as well. This is the Brandis house here in Washington, and I especially enjoy the clerestory windows on this. The additional level with clerestory windows add additional light and air and space above. Here's the Mossberg house living room with its great gabled cathedral ceiling, and there's a balcony above next to the fireplace. In the Mossberg living room, vertical fireplace elements draw your eyes upward. Here's the Zimmerman house with its awesome clerestory window at the end of the gable. The board and batten ceiling boards travel out from the interior of the house outside to the exterior, unimpeded. Here's Taliesin West with its dynamic shed roofs. The original house was a tent of canvas and glass. This house has interesting glass over the desert masonry at the end of the living room, and it also has some interesting clerestory windows up at the peak of the roof. The Penfield house is remarkable for its tall, almost two-story living room space with very large clerestory windows. I don't think you could do this anywhere but in this house, which is surrounded by a forest. The Ofelt house has this amazing large window covering two walls of the living room. As you notice, there are no wood elements separating the window glass from the ceiling. So the ceiling appears to pass right out through the windows. Oh yeah, and here's falling water. This is a shot from the one of the bedrooms where you can open the windows and the entire corner of the room disappears. There's no corner post, no fixed glass. The use of non-square geometry disrupts our ability to predict the shape of a room, thus engaging more of our brain to appreciate the building. Good night. Thanks for watching.